They thought my silence meant weakness. They were wrong. I still remember that night, the echo of their laughter cutting through the soft hum of the office lights, every word sharper than broken glass. My name was the punchline to their jokes, my effort the target of their ridicule. And I just sat there, quiet, calm, forgettable. My name's Evelyn Park, junior analyst at Hendricks & Cole, a corporate jungle dressed in glass walls and fake smiles. I'd only been there 6 months, and already I understood how the hierarchy worked. Louder voices climbed faster. Mine wasn't loud enough. At least, that's what they thought. The ringleader of their mockery was Liam Brooks, the golden boy of the department. Charming, confident, the kind of man who could turn a spreadsheet into a performance. He had everyone fooled, especially our boss, Mara Quinn, who treated him like a prodigy. But under that polished grin was something else. Cruelty disguised as charisma. The first time he joked about me, I let it slide. The second time, I smiled along. By the 10th, I'd learned that silence wasn't surrender, it was storage. Every insult went into a mental vault, every smirk carefully recorded in the quiet corners of my mind. It started with whispers. Evelyn double-checks everything like she's scared of numbers. Maybe she's just slow. Laughter. Then, louder jabs in meetings. She's sweet, but not exactly management material. The others joined in, laughing because that's what people do when they fear being the next target. I never responded. Not once. I just watched. Observed. Remembered. What they didn't know was that behind my quiet demeanor, I'd been building something slowly, carefully, like a spider weaving a web no one notices until it's too late. One afternoon, while the others left for lunch, I stayed back. The fluorescent light buzzed above me as I sifted through reports Liam had polished before sending them to Mara. The numbers looked too perfect, too clean. My instincts told me something was off. I started digging. Hidden beneath layers of adjusted data and presentation formatting, I found discrepancies, minor at first, but consistent. The kind of tweaks that made Liam's projects seem more profitable than they actually were. Enough to make him look like a genius. Enough to get someone else fired when the truth came out. Someone like me. The realization hit me like ice. He wasn't just mocking me for fun. He was setting me up to fail. Still, I said nothing. I kept my smile, my polite nods, my quiet demeanor. If silence was what they saw me as, then silence was what I'd use to destroy them. The office was celebrating the quarterly results that week. Liam stood at the front, holding a glass of champagne, giving another one of his charming speeches. Everyone clapped. Even Mara. I stood in the back, invisible, watching the man who'd made me feel small soak in applause he didn't deserve. But this time, I wasn't angry. I was steady. Calm. Because I had something he didn't know. I had proof. Not just numbers. Not just documents. Emails. Logs. Access records. Enough to unravel his golden boy image thread by thread. But revenge, I decided, couldn't be rushed. It had to breathe. It had to hurt. That night, I walked out of the office into the cold city air, my reflection flickering in the glass doors behind me. For a moment, I saw what they saw, a quiet, harmless girl who would never fight back. And I smiled. Because I knew they'd already written my story for me. They'd cast me as the background character, the forgettable one, the one who fades into silence. But they forgot one thing. Silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes, it's just the sound before the storm. There's a saying that silence sharpens your hearing. When you stop trying to talk over the noise, you start noticing the details, the looks, the pauses, the small lies that people think slip by unnoticed. And lately, the office had been full of them. After the quarterly celebration, things shifted. Not suddenly, but like a temperature drop you only feel after the sun's gone. Liam seemed busier than ever, always on his phone, always in meetings that weren't on the shared calendar. He'd vanish into the conference room with Mara for hours, blinds drawn, reappearing with that same smug half-smile that made my skin crawl. Once, I overheard them laughing as I walked past, then silence when they realized I was near. "Evelyn," Mara said with her usual polite tone, "could you close the door on your way out?" Just like that. Invisible again. Still, I kept my voice steady, my face calm. But inside, the unease grew. It started small. My workload doubled: overnight reports, budgets, last-minute revisions, all delegated from Liam because he was overwhelmed. I didn't complain, I never did. That's what made me useful to them. Quiet meant compliant. But the more I looked at the files he sent, the more the red flags multiplied. Figures didn't match between drafts. Client projections were altered sometimes by entire percentage points. It was subtle enough to fool someone glancing through, but not me. I'd been trained to notice patterns. One evening, long after most people had left, I saw Liam in the break room, leaning over his phone with that same perfect grin. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Yeah, don't worry, it's handled. She won't even notice." Then laughter. He ended the call and looked up. For a second, our eyes met through the glass wall. "Working late again, Evelyn?" he asked, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Always," I replied. He smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should take a break once in a while. You look tired." I wanted to ask who he was talking about. But instead, I just nodded and returned to my desk. I wasn't ready, not yet. The next day, I found one of my reports on Mara's desk. She was frowning at it, flipping through the pages. Liam stood beside her, pointing at something. "That's not how I showed her to do it," he said, shaking his head. "I told her to double-check the cost analysis before finalizing." It hit me like a slap. He was blaming me. Mara looked up, disappointment in her eyes. "Evelyn, can you step in for a moment?" I froze in the doorway, pulse pounding. "Yes. This report's off by 5,000 in projected revenue. That's not like you." I leaned in. "That's strange, I double-checked everything." Liam gave a sympathetic shrug. "Don't worry, it happens. Numbers can be tricky sometimes." I wanted to scream. To tell her I never made that mistake, that the only version I'd sent was clean. But how could I prove it without showing that I'd been watching him? Without revealing I'd already been suspicious? So I stayed silent. "Fix it by tomorrow," Mara said softly. "I trust you'll get it right." When I left her office, Liam flashed me that same easy grin. "No hard feelings?" "None," I lied. That night, I opened every file I'd sent in the last 2 months. Cross-checked, compared timestamps, traced edits. It was all there, small, quiet changes made after submission. He had access. He'd used my work as a shield for his own alterations, framing me for every inconsistency. And still, I said nothing. Because I needed more. I needed proof. But the silence was starting to eat at me. At home, I'd lie awake replaying every moment: his smirk, Mara's tone, the whispers I couldn't quite hear. I'd think about the laughter that once echoed around me, and how now, it was the silence that hurt more. One Friday, as everyone packed up for the weekend, I noticed Liam's office light still on. Through the glass, I saw him typing quickly, switching between tabs, glancing at the door. I walked closer, pretending to grab coffee, and caught a glimpse of his screen. A personal account. Not company-linked. And a familiar file open, one I'd written. My throat tightened. He was sending it somewhere. He must have felt me behind him, because he turned just as I stepped away. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Guess we both are." He chuckled. "Yeah. Just tying up loose ends." He didn't know it yet, but so was I. When I finally left that night, the reflection in the elevator mirror looked different. The exhaustion was there, yes, but behind it, something colder. Patience. Because the silence that once made me small was now the thing keeping me hidden. And soon, I'd make them wish they'd never taught me how powerful quiet could be. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day that starts ordinary coffee too bitter, inbox too full, and ends with your entire world cracking open. By then, the tension in the office had turned into a living thing. Whispers followed me wherever I went. People stopped sharing updates in group chats. Meetings I used to attend were suddenly rescheduled without notice. And Liam? He was shining brighter than ever. He'd been given a new project, the Vega account, a multi-million-dollar client that could make or break careers. It was supposed to be mine. I'd done the groundwork, the research, the endless nights of unpaid overtime building that proposal from scratch. But when the project was announced, my name wasn't even mentioned. Instead, Mara smiled proudly at him across the boardroom table. Liam, your presentation was outstanding. This could redefine our entire department. I remember gripping my pen so hard the plastic cracked. He stood up, polished and perfect. Thank you, Mara. But honestly, I couldn't have done it without my team. He glanced at me, then just long enough to twist the knife. Because on the screen behind him was my work. My slides. My design. My numbers. All of it. Except he'd erased my name. Not one mention. Not even in the credits at the end. A dull roar filled my ears as the others applauded. I felt like I was watching myself drown in slow motion. Months of silence, of endurance, all undone by one smirk. After the meeting, I waited until the last person left. Liam was still inside, packing his laptop. Nice presentation, I said. My voice was steady, almost too calm. He looked up, feigning innocence. Thanks, Evelyn. You saw it. You mean mine? Yeah. I saw it. He laughed softly, leaning against the table. Yours? Oh, come on. You helped, sure, but I put it all together. You know how these things work. I took a step closer. I built that proposal from scratch. Every line, every model, those were my numbers. He shrugged. Then you should have presented it yourself. That's when it hit me. The cruelty wasn't accidental, it was calculated. He'd waited. Watched me trust him. Let me work quietly behind him, knowing I wouldn't speak up. Because that's what I did best, right? Stay silent. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him, the fluorescent light slicing across his face. His expression was calm, but his eyes cold, smug, gave him away. You used me, I whispered. Don't make it sound so dramatic, he said, brushing past me. It's business. You'll understand someday. He left, and the door swung shut behind him, leaving only the echo of his words and something inside me breaking. I went to the restroom and locked myself in a stall. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone. The betrayal stung worse because it wasn't loud or violent, it was quiet, deliberate, and public. They mocked me for being silent, and he'd weaponized that very silence against me. When I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't see the same woman. My reflection stared back with something new in her eyes, not just pain, but intent. That night, I stayed late again. Everyone was gone. The office was still. I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing monitor, pulling up file histories, timestamps, and email trails. Every edit he'd made to my project. Every adjustment. Every time he'd copied, renamed, or forwarded something under his login. And then I found it, an internal memo to the board from Mara. Congratulations to Liam Brooks for securing the Vega account. His leadership and innovative approach exemplify the spirit of Hendricks and Cole. Attached to it was a transfer notice. Promotion. Bonus. Relocation to the New York office. He'd stolen my work, and used it to climb out of reach. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to storm into Mara's office and expose him right then, but I stopped myself. Because I realized something even worse. She knew. The email thread showed their exchange. Mara had forwarded my drafts to Liam weeks before the presentation. Make sure this looks client-ready. Evelyn's not assertive enough to handle the meeting. Not assertive enough. That's what my silence had cost me everything. For hours I sat there, staring at that email chain, the betrayal burning holes through my screen. I thought of every time I'd smiled through their jokes, every time I'd swallowed my pride just to keep peace. They mocked me. They used me. They erased me. But they made one mistake. They taught me how to disappear and how dangerous that can be when the person you erase learns how to watch in silence. When I finally shut down my computer, I wasn't shaking anymore. My heartbeat was slow, calm. Because now I knew exactly what kind of story I was in. And I wasn't the quiet girl anymore. I was the ghost in their system. And ghosts don't forget. For 3 days, I didn't speak to anyone. Not at work. Not at home. Not even to myself. Silence had always been my shield, but now, it felt like a cage. Every time I tried to sleep, my mind replayed it all: the stolen project, Mara's betrayal, Liam's smirk. The sound of the applause when my name should have been spoken. It haunted me. I'd built my career believing that good work spoke louder than pride. That if I just stayed steady and diligent, people would see my worth. But all my quiet effort had done was make me invisible enough for someone else to steal everything I built. By Thursday morning, the numbness gave way to something sharper. Anger. It didn't explode all at once. It started as a tremor, something small but steady, growing beneath the surface. I saw Liam in the hallway, surrounded by people congratulating him on his promotion. He had his hand on Mara's shoulder, laughing at something she said. Their smiles didn't even look real anymore, just masks carved out of arrogance. As he walked past me, he said, "Hey Evelyn, heard you're taking over some of my old reports. Don't mess them up, okay?" And he winked. That was it. The trigger. The moment the silence finally cracked. I didn't respond, not because I was scared this time, but because I didn't need to. Something inside me shifted, like a lock clicking open. That night, I went home, turned off my phone, and opened my laptop. For the first time, I didn't look at numbers, I looked at patterns of behavior. How long had I been silent? How many times had I let someone else's voice drown mine out because I thought patience was strength? It wasn't. Patience was the rope they'd used to hang my confidence. I spent hours going through every email, every file, every document I'd worked on in the last year. Each one told a story not of failure, but of effort, of proof, of me. And then, somewhere between exhaustion and fury, the idea came. If silence could destroy me, then maybe it could destroy them too. Not through shouting. Not through confrontation. Through exposure. Through undeniable truth. I didn't need to humiliate them in person, I needed to make their lies collapse under their own weight. Quietly. Precisely. So I started gathering everything. Every file Liam had edited. Every time Mara had forwarded my work to him. Every Slack message, timestamp, and project note with my initials buried deep in the metadata. By dawn, I had a folder labeled Echo. Because that's what I'd become, the echo of their lies that would come back to haunt them. But before I acted, I needed something else, proof from the source. The next day, I stayed late again. The office was empty except for the hum of the air conditioning. Liam's desk sat across from mine, tidy as always, his login still active on one of the shared computers. Careless. Confident. Predictable. I slipped in, opened his email drafts, and found exactly what I was hoping for: correspondence with another firm. He'd been shopping my Vega data to a competitor before he even pitched it here. He wasn't just stealing credit. He was selling it. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Not from fear this time, but from a surge of power. This was it. The proof. The leverage. The justice. For the first time in months, I felt awake. I copied the files, backed them up, encrypted them. Every click of the mouse felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I finally shut down the computer, I caught my reflection in the darkened monitor. Same face. Same tired eyes. But something was different. The quiet wasn't submission anymore, it was control. Because now, my silence had purpose. I walked out of the office into the cold night air. The city lights shimmered against the glass buildings, each one reflecting the world back in fragments like truth itself, waiting to be pieced together. I'd spent months being mocked, ignored, erased. Now, I would make sure every single person who'd done that would hear me. Not through words, but through consequences. Liam thought silence made me weak. He was about to learn it makes me invisible, and that's far more dangerous. For the first time, I smiled, not bitterly, but with a calm certainty. The storm was coming. And I was the one who had been learning how to control the thunder. There's a difference between revenge that rages and revenge that plans. The first burns everything to the ground and leaves you with ash. The second is quieter, like a surgeon's hand, precise, clean, and impossible to ignore. I chose the second. The folder on my desktop Echo had grown heavy. It held everything, every draft, every timestamp, every forwarded message where Mara had smiled and called me not assertive enough. It had Liam's careless edits, his offhand Slack messages, the draft he'd emailed to a competitor. I copied it to 3 places: an encrypted USB I hid in my bag, a secure cloud folder only accessible with my company credentials, and most importantly an offline hard drive I'd keep hidden at home. Redundancy. Insurance. Calm. Step 1. Make the proof airtight. I focused on provenance. Facts alone could be disputed, but metadata could not. File creation dates, edit histories, IP logs tied to Liam's workstation, and user access timestamps from the shared drive. I pulled audit logs, a routine request. I phrased it as part of a monthly report, exported them, and matched every one to the documents in Echo. Each match was a small victory: a time-stamped edit that showed his hands on my work, an email thread where Mara forwarded my slides to him with a polite "tidy this up for presentation," a calendar invite where Liam had reserved the conference room under a different name. Step 2. Bait. If I wanted Liam to slip, I needed him to use something I'd prepared. I created a polished decoy file vega_pitch_final_v3.pptx that looked client-ready. The catch: a tiny, deliberate inconsistency in the cost model, imperceptible unless you ran the reconciliation, exactly the kind of error a rushed presenter would miss but the auditors couldn't. I placed it on the shared drive in the Vega folder and accidentally left a note in the team chat: FYI, final version uploaded. Please review before Friday pitch. I timed the message for a Friday morning when Liam usually grabbed the client lead. Step 3. Control the map. I couldn't risk this becoming a he said she said. So I created a map of who would receive proof if anything went wrong: HR, legal, the CEO's assistant, and an external auditor I'd once met at a seminar and who'd been quietly helpful about compliance. I compressed Echo into an encrypted archive and split it into 3 parts. One part would go to HR with a cover note disguised as a compliance tip, another would go to the CEO's assistant labeled urgent project irregularities, the third I'd hold back until I saw how the bait played out. Timing was everything: flood the system fast enough that they couldn't smother it in whispers. Step 4. Set the cameras in motion. I set up simple monitoring: no hacking, just observation. I used the company's access logs and a routine IT ticket, a harmless request about a backup restoration, to get a copy of the file access list for the Vega folder. When Liam opened the decoy, the log would show his user ID and the exact time. I also kept an eye on his calendar and typical habits. Friday afternoon pitches meant rushed reviews, and rushed reviews meant mistakes. Step 5. Prepare the narrative. Proof by itself doesn't always lead to consequences. People argue, deflect, or blame procedure. So I drafted a clear timeline, 1-page, bullet points, dates, and direct links to the files in Echo. I attached screenshots of email threads where Mara instructed Liam to polish the proposal, and a copy of the transfer notice naming him for promotion. The narrative wasn't dramatic, it was a clinical map from theft to reward. I rehearsed it like a witness statement so the story would be simple and undeniable. All the while, Liam continued to swim in the comfort of his promotion. He strutted through the halls, exchanged jokes with Mara, and congratulated me, smiling like a man who thinks he owns the building. He still felt in control. That was the delicious and dangerous part. The more he flaunted it, the faster his arrogance would show through the cracks I'd made. On Thursday, I nudged the plan forward. A little message to the Vega team chat, nonchalant, professional, said the final deck was uploaded and that the client sounded keen on a Friday demo. Liam's eyes lit up when he saw it. The trap was set. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the hard drive and the Echo folder open, the timeline ready to send. I didn't hit send. Not yet. The thrill wasn't in the attack, it was in the moment before the fall. Watching them build their own stage while holding the script in my hand felt like waiting for thunder to roll. I had not come this far to blow it all in a single scream. My plan was methodical: let Liam step into the trap, let the logs capture him, let the timeline do the talking. When the error in the decoy surfaced during the client call, when finance flagged the miscalculation and the audit trail pointed to his file access, there would be nowhere left for Mara or Liam to hide. For now, they still walked like kings. They still laughed. But kings don't notice the architects who quietly remove the stones from beneath the throne. I closed my laptop and felt the dark weight of Echo at my side. The next day would be the bait, the day after, the consequences. My heartbeat was steady, tuned not to panic, but to the rhythm of action. The silence that had protected me was no longer a prison. It was a weapon. And in the quiet before the storm, I finally slept. The conference room was glass and light and the kind of sterile dignity companies pay millions to cultivate. Today, it felt smaller. The Vega client sat across from us, 3 men in tailored suits, polite smiles that hid real questions. Cameras were turned on for the remote execs. Liam stood at the front, confident, ready to dazzle. I sat at the far end of the table, a silent shadow among applause. HR, legal, and the CEO's assistant weren't here yet, they were on standby outside the building. The external auditor, retired, crisp, and exacting, was on a video line, listening. My hard drive lay in my bag like a cold heart. Liam opened the deck with the same practiced flourish he'd used to steal my life. He sailed through the slides, voice smooth, jokes timed to coax chuckles. At first, the room accepted him. The client nodded. Then, when he hit the cost reconciliation slide, the one I'd seeded with the tiny, deliberate inconsistency, I felt the air change. One of the client's finance leads frowned. "Can you run through how you reconciled these figures?" she asked, voice clipped. Liam glanced at his notes, blinked, and clicked the next animation. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's all reconciled. Look at the summary here." He spoke fast, too fast. The client asked again. "We've got an unexpected variance of 7% on operational costs. That's material. Can you show the model?" He stuttered. For the first time in months, I heard uncertainty in his voice. "Evelyn," Mara said, loud and quick, "can you?" I stood. My chair scraped like a gunshot in the quiet room. I didn't plan to speak. I planned to show. I connected my laptop to the meeting feed and opened the timeline. Clean, clinical, impossible to refute. The client screen filled with a document, dates, edits, timestamps, and a path that led straight from my drafts to the deck Liam was now presenting. A silence I'd known my whole life settled in the room, different now, heavy, unavoidable. The finance lead called the variance out again. This model was last edited by user L. Brooks at 10:14 am. And this reconciliation was modified after the version Evelyn uploaded. She clicked through the attached access log and the conference monitors showed the exact IP and user credentials. Liam's face whitened. He tried to laugh it off. It's a collaborative document, anyone could have. I didn't let him finish. I pressed play on an audio clip I'd captured, a discreetly recorded call where Liam joked about selling the Vega model and Mara's soft reply, "Make it client ready, she won't push back." The client watched his smile thaw into panic. From outside the room, the CEO's assistant walked in, followed by HR and a woman from legal who wore the kind of expression that meant she'd seen worse but not this brazen. I'd sent them the first package before the call, a succinct note and the first part of Echo labeled, "For urgent review platform irregularities." Their faces shifted as they scanned the packet. "You have evidence?" Mara asked, voice brittle. She sounded smaller than the woman who'd lost me to a mere sentence. I opened another folder, copies of the emails, the forwarded drafts, the transfers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The room read the facts. Liam's promotion notice, the internal memo praising him, the transfer order, everything was there like a rope tied to a single chair. The client's lead folded her hands. "We can't proceed with a partner who misrepresents intellectual property," she said slowly. "We need a firm that demonstrates integrity. We'll need time to reassess." Her eyes slid to the CEO on the video link. "Until then, we must pause conversations." Liam's mouth opened, closed. He looked like someone who had been pulled from a stage mid-applause and shoved under a spotlight that exposed everything. Legal moved like a machine. "We'll be initiating an internal investigation," the lawyer said, voice flat. "You're both on administrative leave effective immediately." She looked at Mara. "And Ms. Quinn, we'll need an account of your communications." Mara's posture crumpled just enough for every camera in the room to catch it. The clients murmured, the cameras clicked. Outside the glass, the hallway filled with whispers, colleagues craning for sight, and the elevator dinged as people realized what was happening. Liam's network of supporters collapsed into stunned silence. He reached for an explanation and found the air had already closed in on him. Then, the taste of the climax, the CEO's assistant pulled up the second part of Echo, an encrypted archive that contained the forwarded version Liam had sent to the competitor. It opened on screen like an accusation. The client's finance lead paled. "We have concerns about confidentiality breaches," she said. "This is grounds to terminate, and possibly legal action." Liam's voice finally broke. "Evelyn, he started, but his words were empty echoes. No one cheered. Nothing felt juvenile. This wasn't about gloating. It was clinical and precise, the exact retribution I'd planned. I watched Liam's empire of borrowed charisma crumble, promotion paused, reputation shredded, potential legal suits waiting like shadows. Mara tried to salvage it, something about miscommunication, about process. HR's expression hardened. Legal had already typed phrases I'd practiced in my head: breach of conduct, intellectual property theft, conflict of interest. The clients closed their laptops as if sealing a coffin. When the board's counsel asked for the final timeline, I pushed the file across the screen. It was a cold, clear trail from my drafts to his pitch to the competitor, all linked by the raw data they couldn't argue with. The room vibrated with the gravity of it. Liam's face, once flawless, was a manuscript of panic. He looked to Mara for rescue, but the rescue had the texture of denial and fear. For the first time, I watched arrogance meet consequence, and it was quiet, brutal, and irrevocable. As security escorted them from the conference room, people stared not with triumph, but with the recognition that truth, when served without theatrics, does the job much better than any scream. The applause that should have been mine returned in a different form: nods, private looks, respect. Not all at once. Not loudly. But it was there. I gathered my laptop, my hard drive, the echo folder, pieces of a life I'd reclaimed. My hands were steady. I felt lighter and colder and infinitely more real. Outside, the city hummed its indifferent song. Inside, a silence settled this time, not a cage but a seal. They had mocked me into quiet, and I had learned to let quiet become a reckoning. As the doors closed behind them, I understood how stories end, not with noise, but with the exactness of truth. The silence I'd kept had finally spoken, and it said everything. The storm finally passed. But when it did, it left behind silence, the kind that doesn't hide anymore, the kind that echoes. A week after the audit, the office felt like a ghost town. Liam's name was stripped off every project, every plaque, every report he'd ever led. The golden boy who once laughed the loudest now walked through the halls like a shadow, avoiding every glance, every whisper. When the board confirmed his suspension pending investigation, he tried to bluff it out, said it was all a misunderstanding. But the numbers didn't lie. The emails didn't lie. And neither did I. For the first time, I didn't have to raise my voice to be heard. The truth spoke for me. Mara Quinn, our boss, once his biggest supporter, couldn't even look at him during the final meeting. She'd trusted him blindly. Now, she just looked tired, disappointed, and a little ashamed. I should have seen it, she said quietly after he left. Some people make sure you don't, I replied. It wasn't triumph I felt. Not really. It was release. Months of humiliation, self-doubt, and biting my tongue finally unraveling into peace. Still, when I walked past Liam's now empty desk, I paused. The desk that used to be surrounded by laughter, flattery, and the sound of him taking credit for others' work. Now, it was just paper and dust. His coffee mug sat on the corner, the one that said "Number 1 Performer." I almost smiled. He came in one last time for his things. I didn't expect him to speak to me. But he did. You did this, he said quietly, his voice stripped of all its arrogance. I met his gaze. No, Liam. You did this. I just stopped pretending not to notice. He wanted to say something, maybe an insult, maybe an apology, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known him, Liam Brooks was speechless. He turned and walked out without looking back. The next few weeks changed everything. The board offered me a temporary leadership role to stabilize the team while they found a replacement for Liam. Word spread fast, not just about what he did, but about how I handled it. People who once ignored me now came to me for advice. The ones who had laughed with him apologized in quiet corners. I didn't blame them. Fear makes people follow noise. But I wasn't angry anymore. I'd learned something far more valuable than revenge: the power of stillness. Silence had been my weapon all along. It let me listen, observe, collect the truth while everyone else got distracted by their own voices. And when the time came to strike, I didn't have to scream. I just spoke. And the world finally listened. Months later, I got a message from an unknown number. You won, Evelyn. Congratulations. It was him. Liam. I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about walking away knowing I never stooped to his level. I'd been mocked, underestimated, humiliated, and yet, I never forgot. And because I never forgot, I never forgave, either. But I didn't have to. His downfall was already permanent. Not because of what I did, but because of who he chose to be. Now, when I walk into that office, people look up. They greet me with respect, not out of fear, but recognition. The quiet girl they once ignored had become the one they listened to. And sometimes, when new employees join, I catch them glancing at Liam's old desk. No one sits there anymore. It's a reminder. That even the loudest voices can fall silent. That even the quietest person remembers. I stood by the window one evening, watching the city lights blink alive, the same view I used to stare at when I felt invisible. And I whispered to myself. They mocked my silence, but my silence outlasted their laughter. And for the first time in a long time, I truly smiled.